The first time I realized that being a lady and having lady parts meant having some sort of power, I was 12. I'd always looked roughly 22 even then, or so I was told. When I look back on photos of myself, I think I clearly looked like a child, but the men around me didn't seem to think so. Having power meant that I could ask boys to do things for me, and they would do them. And these were big things back then. They would give me their sodas and let me cut in line. And that's pretty much it. But despite the obvious perks, this thing, this power, it still seemed like a bad deal in the end. It was terribly contractual. They wanted me, and if I wanted something from them, I had to let them be near me, and maybe even touch me, which seemed terribly manipulative and was icky, so I stopped doing that. The first time I took a hold of and used my only real available power with someone I actually wanted to be close to, I was 14. And by my available power, I don't mean sex or smiling or the utilization of carefully arranged lady bits. I mean my power to choose. The thing with that other power, the power I discovered at 12, is that it was predicated on someone else already wanting me. It was dependent upon someone else's desire. And once they wanted me, then I could manipulate them, but that power sucks. And I know for hundreds of years, that power has been the main source of control available to women, but this was the late 90s. I didn't want that fake passive power. I wanted real power. I have, to date, only chosen 2 men in my life because, as it turns out, choosing is terrifying. The first when I was a freshman in high school, from whom I learned a lesson in controlling desire, and the second was 3.5 years ago, from whom I've recently separated, feeling totally heartbroken, lost, and also strangely free. I feel free because I can finally stop fighting for him. And now I get to stop trying to convince him to love me, which was a terrible full-time job. Emery was first. I was a freshman in high school, he was a senior. It's a cliche, I know. But I was just one of those girls who dated upperclassmen and then dated college boys while I was still in high school. I don't know why. When I look back on it now, I question everyone's involved's judgment. Emery was tall, lanky, introspective. He was a senior in high school. He had wild red hair and carried his guitar everywhere with a sense of importance that I found to be irresistible. He had full lips and was deeply concerned with his imagined receding hairlines. He would check it all the time. I looked up to him. It seems silly now to look up to a senior in high school, to a 17-year-old, but to me then, he was an adult, while I was still a kid. To me then, he was magic. I was 14, unsure of myself in most ways, but excellent at aping confidence in that way that precocious girls do. We met in a music theory class, and soon we were spending every day after school together, lying in his bed, listening to music. That's what we did. We appreciated things together. We absorbed music and we caressed. That was us. Snuggling and listening to Neil Young, Nick Drake, Leonard Cohen, letting the music express what we couldn't, which, looking at that list of artists, must have been mostly sadness and longing. I admired him. I wanted him. I was super not cool about it. I don't even know when my feelings for him took over. All I know is that at some point, soon after we started hanging out, I fell in love. It was swift, and it was final. I chose him. I committed. I was willing to do anything for him in a basic and primal way. To me, he was mine. It was a heady feeling. It was a feeling flush with certainty and power. We didn't talk about how we felt about each other. We just went from not spending every day together to spending every day together. We would drive to the highest point in town and make out in his car. We would lie in his bed and listen to music and make observations that seemed really meaningful, but they're not. Like, we would just look at how our bodies fit together. Thought they meant something. The arch of his foot fit the curve of my cheek perfectly. No cuddle position was awkward. I thought that meant something. I thought that meant that we were meant to be there, in his room, in his car, just the way we were. But then he slept with someone else. another senior, and broke my heart. Ours wasn't a relationship that was meant to last, but somehow we had never talked about that. I never thought about the realities of it, that he was graduating soon and would leave. But why he had to leave the way he did, I don't know. A month went by, and then a few things happened, and they happened quickly. First, I broke my foot, screwing my chance to compete in the state competition for track. And this does not matter for the purposes of this story, but it's my one last chance to brag about qualifying for states in the 4x4 relay, so I'm bragging. I was really fast. No big deal. And then my parents found and read a draft of a letter I'd written to my best friend, my cousin who lived overseas, detailing my first and at that point only attempt at oral sex, which had been disastrous. In the email, I explained how there I was, doing my tentative best, when I felt him wince, and then I saw blood. Somehow I had cut him with my teeth, and his penis was now bleeding. I just want to reiterate, in case everyone's not uncomfortable enough. There was blood on his penis. Everyone feel really awkward? Great. So he was pretty gracious about it, or as gracious as anyone could be at that point. But that is really not how that was supposed to go. So it makes sense that I would need to talk to my best friend about it. And it also makes sense that my dad would totally freak out when he read that his youngest child's first attempt at a blowjob, regardless of how poorly it had gone. My parents were horrified and furious. I'd always been the kid who they trusted because I had told them everything. And now I had become sexually active without their knowledge, and I had dated a boy that they hadn't known I was dating, and they felt betrayed. If I hadn't been 14 and had had my wits about me, I would have told them to join the club because there was a lot of that going on. And at that point, there was no one left to talk to because Emery was gone. Despite the fact that he had moved away and moved on and left me in this mess, I still loved him. I was still choosing him. Because that's how it seems to be with choosing. Once you do it, at least for me, it's really hard to stop. But I stopped feeling powerful in my choice, and instead I felt at his mercy. I jumped whenever a red Volvo, his car, came down the road. I thought of him when I heard any of the music we'd listened to. Actually, I heard it today in a restaurant, and I was like, perfect. Perfect, get sad. And I, despite myself, waited for him to come back to me, which he did. And whenever he did come home, which was 3 or 4 times a year, we saw each other. He would let me know he was in town, and I, swallowing my hurt and feelings of abandonment, would head up the hill to his house. I just couldn't help myself. I loved him, and I wanted him with this intensity that overwhelmed me. I felt lucky. I felt lucky to be his friend and his whatever else we were to each other. More than anything, I was grateful that he wanted to be with me. I felt so ordinary. And here was someone amazing who saw me the way I hoped to be seen. And then 2 years later, my junior year, he came home from one of his visits, and our dynamic changed, and I learned something old that felt new. He came to visit like normal. I went up the hill like normal, took off my clothes like normal. But then something different happened. I looked at him, maybe for the first time, and I saw him not as this man I loved and I wanted, but the way an impartial observer would see him. I wasn't in the moment with him anymore. I was outside watching, and his eyes were heavy with desire, his lips were parted, his hands were eager, and he looked not strong, but needy. And I, in a moment that I now recognize as triumphant, realized that for the first time, maybe in my entire life, I felt Nothing. He wanted me, and I was indifferent. It was amazing. I felt untouchable, and I felt brave. And I asked him in a really cocky way, "Do you like what you see?" And he said, "Yes." Which is exactly the right answer. He wanted me, and I could let him have me or not. I felt finally in control. That vulnerability that I had felt for so long, that longing and desperation, I realized then that that was what fools did. It was amazing. I felt in control. I was empowered. I felt like I had made an important discovery, for science. And after that, I had boyfriends, even a man I loved, but I kept myself safe. I kept myself distant. I consciously or unconsciously, stopped taking risks with my heart. I stopped choosing and only let myself be chosen. I was a passive participant in love. I turned away from the men I wanted, the men I had an instinct about, the ones I really desired. I turned away from them. I just didn't trust myself. I didn't trust my feelings not to lead me into desperation. They were too powerful. I thought I could never really have who I wanted for the very reason that I wanted them too much. That relationship with Emery, as much as it was that, was a fantastic lesson for me in the wisdom of not going for what you want. And this lesson had a ripple effect throughout the rest of my life. I never told people my plans in case I didn't achieve them. I never asked out the boys who caught my eye, because they were probably out of my league. And I never admitted what it was that I really wanted in case I didn't get it. I learned to sublimate my desire and only smile at the boys who smiled at me first. That is, until 3.5 years ago, when I was cracked open and I chose again. I think I was so ready to choose someone that when I met Arthur, I fell in love with him at the moment of our first kiss. Like, boom. What's so rare about this experience is that it was one of the very few times in my life when I didn't feel like I needed to wait for him to be on board. I didn't need his approval. I didn't need to play the game of tender feelings. Will you love me? Is this safe? Can I trust you with my love? No. I just dove head first in, and then I told him how I felt. I felt so strong in myself. I was so sure of my feelings, all the while knowing that he probably wasn't going to be able to say the same thing back. All the while knowing that this confidence was no real protection from rejection, but feeling protected nonetheless. And I was so proud of myself. I was so proud of myself for loving him independently of how he felt about me, for not needing his permission or his reciprocation. I don't know if I was hoping to earn my Girl Scouts badge in boldness, or if I was just so confident in myself that it did not occur to me that it wouldn't work out. But I told myself, I'm not so timid that I need him to love me back before I can love him. I told myself that him not loving me back was actually a good thing, because I still loved him despite that. And surely that was evidence of how strongly I felt, and surely that was proof of how right this was. I just knew that if I loved him, he would love me too. Maybe not right in this moment, maybe not in an hour, but soon. And I knew that I could wait for that. I could be patient with the slow movement of his heart. There is a power in choosing someone, and I like the rush of it. The certainty and that feeling of, yes, you. I want you. No one has made my decision for me. There has been no quorum. There has been no weighing of the pros and cons. I want you even if you don't want me. This is who I am. This is what I want. And then waiting for a response. But the response is crucial. And heartbreak is one of the few completely universal experiences that we have as humans. So I guess the odds were always good that my heart was going to break, but I did not see it coming. It was a cruel trick, I had been unavailable for so long, and now I was hopelessly in love with a man who would never, despite what he said, ever be mine. I held my love out to him, and he flinched. He withheld what he knew I needed and wanted, and I felt helpless in the face of his withholding. For me, it had been a done deal the moment he kissed me, and I still thought, despite everything, that since I had chosen him, he would eventually choose me back, but he never did. And so now, I'm here. And the temptation to retract back is powerful. I can feel it in the room. I'm wounded, I'm raw, but I still really want to be brave. And despite my history of making either very bold, bad choices, or boldly making no choice at all, I still want the power to choose. Waiting for someone else to choose me exacerbated my feelings of helplessness, and choosing someone who never chose me back ultimately did the same. I don't want that. I don't want to feel helpless. I want power. I want to choose and be chosen. I want the bravery to reach out to the person I love, only to find out that they are already reaching out for me. And if bravery really is foolish, and I'm not saying that it's not, I would like us, whoever we may be, whenever we meet, to be fools together. Thank you.